core values that ethics, justice, and freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
So I'm Dr Lamia Zafrani. I'm a consultant obstetrician and gynaecologist. I specialise in elite female athlete health. So I work as a sports gynaecologist.
And do you think that's because it's just women's health, that just a bit like menopause, it's not necessarily taken as seriously as...
Women's health research, generally, there's been a gap. I mean, women weren't included in research till 1993.
Welcome to the Zest Method channel. I'm Amelia, an ex-army doctor and founder of a preventative medicine coaching business called, you guessed it, the Zest Method. I have an insatiable curiosity about the subconscious mind and self-betterment, and so I'm hoping to, through this medium, share what I learn and hopefully help humans feel better, not perfect. Who is Lamia?
So I think just before we started, I said, that sounds like a values question. And I've never been asked it in that way before. So if I did think of it from like a values perspective, what are my core values that have come up each time I've done this exercise? It's like a careers coaching or any other aspect. It's actually been ethics, justice, and freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
So it's those things. And now that I look at sort of the trajectory of what I'm doing now, it kind of highlights to me why in the past, when I've been struggling at work and the work setups and things, it's always because it's not aligned with what my values are. And I'm so glad, because the way I'm working now, it does actually align with ethics and empowerment. So that was it. It was ethics, empowerment, and freedom and autonomy.
Yeah, ethics, I didn't think of it like that, but I suppose in a way that's the core foundation, or should be, of clinical medicine. We should be ethical practitioners.
I think even outside of clinical medicine, it was more of a broader exercise when I remember doing it. It was just, if you boil things down, like what makes you tick. And I was like, actually, yeah, when things don't feel right or ethical to me, that's when I start getting the dissonance, and then you're not happy, or it just doesn't feel right. So yeah, that's kind of like my North Star. It has to also feel ethically right, whatever I'm doing, which is great if you start working in corporate and things like that. You've got a North Star that still pulls you back. Yeah. So I'm glad
it does
that
actually,
is one.
once you have established these three core pillars that you almost use as your foundation, I have found that when then an opportunity comes along, it's so much easier to know whether to say yes or no.
Yes. Yeah.
Because then you're just going to think, well, does that tick all three boxes?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, it's just not the one.
And if you try and fit it, you realise very quickly that actually, because it doesn't align, that's why it's not quite fitting neatly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there's definitely times in the past where I've maybe wanted to do a career hop and haven't really thought it through or put it against values, and it's been driven by power or money or something, or bigger salary rise. I'm like, well, that's always going to make me happier. And of course, when I've really traced it back, it hasn't been fulfilling at all.
Just delays the inevitable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So learning through the hard way, I think you and I are definitely becoming more aligned in our journeys, definitely. Which then just feels, it might be the harder way, but feels the right way. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic answer.
Thank you.
So then getting straight into it. So please tell me a little bit about yourself, your credentials, who you are, what you do day to day, and what makes up your working week.
Great. So I'm Dr Lamia Zafrani. I'm a consultant obstetrician and gynaecologist. I specialise in elite female athlete health. So I work as a sports gynaecologist. I'm one of very few in the UK. I think I'm the only one.
I was about to say, you're not the only one?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one remaining now.
Yeah.
But I'd very much like it to change. I'd love to train more people.
Yeah.
But But aside from my clinical work, so I still work in the NHS, I have private practicing athletes, and I also work with health tech companies and investment firms around medical due diligence in the female performance space. So anything that they're innovating that fits into the performance realm, I'd like working with those companies too.
So busy.
Busy, yes.
Because also surely in that whole space, when you look at all the clinical trials, clinical studies, all the data, it's all based off male subjects. Yeah. So you're finding there's a massive gap there in research and data evidence.
Pretty much. And that's kind of how I ended up, because I very much get asked, how did you end up in this niche? And I kind of say, well, I had to kind of create it because the gap existed, which I realised about 15, 20 years ago when I started as a junior trainee in obstetrics and gynaecology. Being a powerlifter myself since my early 20s, I had always been interested in sort of the sports, exercise, nutrition, that aspect, which I realised medicine traditionally doesn't teach you those aspects. No. You kind of go and learn about them by yourself if you're interested. But as an obstetrician and gynaecologist in training at the time, I will actually never forget the first athlete I had in my antenatal clinic as an SHO. She was a 32-week CrossFit athlete, and we got talking about exercise, and she just told me, yeah, I'm carrying on. I'm not doing anything differently, no modifications, nothing. And I was really impressed. But then I did stop to think, but, as an obstetrician, I don't actually know what I should be. She wasn't asking my permission to advise her, but I thought, well, if somebody did, I don't actually know, is this safe? Is this good? Is this not good? I don't actually know the answers. And I want to be powerlifting through my future pregnancies, so I better go and find out. So it then put me down this rabbit hole of trying to find these answers and realised very quickly that there was no answers. Yeah. So I then thought, well, I'm going to work with people to make those answers exist if they don't. And then I started training as a pregnancy and postpartum athlete coach in the US, not physically but remotely, but then ended up working with fitness coaches and athletes and teams sort of more ad hoc after I'd done the training, so that if they then had pregnant and postpartum athletes or any athletes with gynecological issues, I would provide that sort of overarching crossover care because I was sports informed. And then it was only after I finished my obstetrics and gynecology training and became a consultant that I actually thought, well, I'm doing this anyway and I might as well formalise it properly. And then that's where it was born.
And did you head to the US because it was just a bigger market?
It was because the training that I did was out of the US, because they are much ahead of the game.
Yes, they are.
Still are, and they were back then.
Yeah.
Then the opportunities were just there because I was already doing the training through a certification that was from the US. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And I still have maintained links in the US, and I've got athletes from Australia, from
global reach.
Yes, yeah.
So then because the UK really, I do find in some ways is quite archaic in its approaches compared to the US, who, like you said, is so advanced. Was it well received, or again took a while just to be able to carve your way in creating the niche? But in the UK,
I think in the UK it's difficult, and it still is difficult. And the people that suffer the most are the female athletes themselves. It's like everything. It's a under-resourcing, lack of funding. So the will is there, and there is a huge shift towards sort of education around issues that female athletes will have by the athletes themselves, by their performance team. So we're doing really well in that regard. Where I see the gap is in the implementation stage. So yes, now the athletes are coming, asking for a fertility checkup, for example, just a gynecological MOT, just to see where they're up to. A lot we're going to talk about, but RED-S, so relative energy deficiency in sport, majority of the athletes I see actually come to me for that.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the athletes, yes, they come to see me for things that all women in my general a gynecology clinic come to see me for as well. But it's affecting their performance, so they want help with that. But the implementation side is where we're currently lacking, which is, yes, now there is building awareness of these issues and why they're important to help female athletes with them for their performance and just for their well-being in general. But then who's actually providing that care and who's informed enough to provide that care?
And so are the barriers to implementation the fact there just isn't funding there, or the marketing angle?
I think a lot of it, when it's if we're looking at sports organisations, it's a funding issue and a resourcing issue, and it as with many things that we're used to dealing with in healthcare, that's the crux of it. People would want certain packages and care and to be available, but it's just not there yet.
And do you think that's because it's just women's health, that just a bit like menopause, it's not necessarily taken as seriously as suddenly there's testosterone decline and every product is on the shelves, yet menopause, it's been around forever.
Yes.
Just isn't taken as seriously. No one tends to want to open that Pandora's box. So is that also the underlying issue?
I think
as
it
well?
definitely is, and an issue that you also picked up on, which was that women's health research, generally there's been a gap. I mean, women weren't included in research till 1993.
1993, that's when I was born. That is so
I was alive then.
Yeah.
Yeah, women weren't included in clinical trials until then because we're too complicated. Our cycles make things too varied. And,
Yes.
And,
Well, that is
and sports research is this pretty much the same, if not worse. So most of what we know about performance comes from male athletes. And female athletes have very unique challenges to performance, to injury risks based around their cycles. And we see this in practice, and the research is only now starting to catch up with that.
And it's 2026.
Yes. But I mean, to be fair, I'm loving the fact that just in the last year or so, 2025 to 2026, we've had so many articles published about exercise and pregnancy. Granted, some of them they have to be, I mean, the way research works, if we're starting from essentially zero, you have to start from zero saying, you know, exercise is beneficial in pregnancy, because the narrative to the general population has been, don't do anything.
Yes.
The athlete population is somewhat different because, and this is why I think they're a great opportunity for public health research generally, because if you can watch athletes, we're going to do whatever we want to do, whether you tell me whether it's safe or not to an extent. You know, we're going to train, etc. So you're never going to get ethics approval to study pregnancy in its entirety in that kind of way. But if you can watch the women that are going to do what they're going to do anyway and then glean the data from that, that's equally, and that's what we're finding that is happening with sort of athlete-based research.
And sometimes it almost is that anecdotal evidence.
And there's enough of them out there, so if we can gather enough of it, it's still strong data. But it's great that the research is now just article after article after article. So it's really, really good to see.
So you're definitely in the right space.
Definitely.
Forefront.
Yeah.
Leading.
And I always say this, up until recently, it's been expert opinion because there hasn't been any data to back it up. So we see enough athletes to be able to say, and if you know the physiology, you understand the biomechanics, you understand obstetrics, then that is where that's what we're trained to do as clinicians, is put everything that we know together in front of our patients to treat our patients individually. And I'll continue doing that until the research tells me to change what I'm doing. And by all means, I'm really open-minded. Yeah. And if that does, and just as it does in obstetrics and gynaecology generally, if the data tells me to change what my practice is, great. That's what evolving is about.
Well, evidence-based medicine, that's
Exactly.
where the saying came from. So then in terms of, maybe we then go down into the pathophysiology or physiology of REDS. I don't know which order to do it in insofar as, do I present my personal case study and then you perhaps wrap in the physiology behind it, or do we do biology first and then case study?
Well, I think maybe we should start with what is RED-S, because I think we know what it is because we've both, personal and professional experience of it.
I'm so pleased you said the acronym, because I know what it is, and then I suddenly, of course, under the spotlight, forgotten. So yes, let's break it down then.
So relative energy deficiency in sport, it's a sport-specific term for essentially hypothalamic amenorrhea. So when you lose your cycles and your periods stop as a result of a mismatch between the calories or energy going in versus the energy expended or energy going out. That's in its simplest term, and it used to be known as the Female Athlete Triad, where you would get menstrual irregularity or dysfunction, you'd get bone, so loss of estrogen, and osteoporosis and fractures, etc. But we've now sort of made it even wider because we know that the effects are so much more. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that you've lost your cycle. And in the past, we would also think that, these women or these patients have, I wouldn't just say women because it actually affects men too, just not as much.
Really?
And their effects are slightly different, but essentially, the same. It just results in lower testosterone and then all of the effects of that. But yes, it has so many far-reaching effects now, and it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's got a low BMI or low body fat. They could have a normal body fat, normal BMI, just that their input-output is not balancing, and then all of the biological effects that happen as a result of that.
Okay. And with those complications or the sequelae that follows, can they be long-lasting and go on to years afterwards, if not?
Yes, we're now seeing that, because in the past it was always seen as, well, you don't have a period, oh, well done, it's because you're actually just training so hard, it's kind of normal, a pat on the back. And, you know, it was almost really, really quite badly seen as, well, if you still have a period, you're just not training as hard, you're not training hard enough. And I'm so glad that the education around RED-S is more widespread, so that athletes are now realizing that actually not having a cycle is not a good thing. It's your body telling you that something's not right and seeking help for that. So that's really good. But you know, there's such a widespread in terms of the symptoms, because it can actually start with just slightly irregular cycles, slightly shortened cycles, and it's only, you know, after a while that it gets to the point where you might actually lose your cycles. Alternatively, I've got some of my athletes, they've just literally been fine and then tipped over and lost their cycles and had 3 months of not having cycles, and then come to see me as a result, because they know that any longer than that, and that's a problem. So yeah.
So actually there is a bit of a buffer between, well, I suppose...
Potentially, yeah. As with everything in biology, you know, you have to know what you're looking for to see. But essentially, yes, traditionally it was known as you lose your cycles. Once your cycles are back, great, everything's back to normal. You're fertile again. Go on, you know, you can crack on. And actually what we see in practice is, I would still see that the athletes who'd recovered from RED-S would still have higher rates of complications. So they were having higher rates of needing IVF. Or despite having their cycles back. So needing IVF, implantation failures, miscarriages, and now we actually have research paper that has actually proven that there is an increased incidence of preterm birth in women who've had RED-S by 3.5 times more than women who haven't.
Yeah, that's very high.
And yeah. So it's really interesting, because we hadn't linked the RED-S to long-term obstetric outcomes up till very recently. But for those of us in practice, we were definitely seeing sort of the fertility side, the early pregnancy, and like the biological reasons for that is, we know that it can cause what we call luteal phase insufficiency. Yeah. So you've got two parts of your cycle: the follicular phase, which is day 1, so your period all the way up to the point of ovulation, and then ovulation to your next period is the luteal phase. Now, in women who've had RED-S or have RED-S, you might notice that even if their cycles are back, that if they've got a progesterone deficiency, pretty much is the easiest way to explain it, the progesterone dominant part of the cycle actually gets shortened. And then you can now understand why you need progesterone for pregnancy. You need it for a successful pregnancy, implantation, all of that. Yep. If you're then not getting that, that's where you then get implantation failures or miscarriages as a result of that.
And because from my understanding, I'm almost sort of embarrassed to forget my biology from medical school, but I just remember the latter part of the cycle is all about then nurturing the uterus, making sure there's a thick lining of blood to be able to have successful implantation if the egg was going to be fertilised. Yeah. So you're saying that when progesterone is lower, that means that the lining is thinner.
Pretty much. Potentially, yes. Yeah, that could be one of the effects, yeah.
God, okay. So, well, what I'll do is I'll tell you my story, because I'm selfishly really intrigued also to learn how maybe I can take some of these sort of tools that you have and implement it myself. So during boarding school, there was a contagion of eating disorders, so that unfortunately I succumbed to, and had anorexia for probably about 5 years, from the age of 15 to 20, so that critical age of growth and hormones, etc. And I was still eating, but just was exercising a hell of a lot, and lost a lot of weight. And then my period stopped, so the doctor in the school was like, well, have a pill to be able to create sort of fake periods. And that probably happened for maybe again about 5-6 years. And then once university happened, then I perhaps started putting on more weight and everything normalised. I came off the pill, and then I thought, of course, I was like fine, and still very much irregular eating perhaps throughout university, but now it's I think much better, much healthier, just whole foods, paleo diet basically. But then last year I had a bit of an issue with my foot, was in some crutches and a boot. So I thought, right, let's be my own case study. Let's do your own MOT to see what's going on, because I wonder whether it's a bony issue. Maybe
was it fracture? What was that?
Well, I think I had the X-ray too soon. It was too fresh, so nothing would have ossified. So I still don't know to this day, because I just didn't want to then go back for it perhaps because it was getting better, so I was like, it's fine. But when I was resting and just did no exercise, at first, of course, when you're at the endorphin crash, I just felt awful being basically effectively on my arse all day. Yes, so sedentary, it was awful. But then something miraculous happened where sleeping so well, everyone was like, you look really well, and appetite came back, and then I did some bloods and estrogen came back low, and then I went for one of those REMS bone scans because I heard that the DEXAs aren't they're so very variable. It varies even with the practitioner that does it, and that I had osteopenia, so I was like, great. So then of course since then it's been on discovery of, right, how is it possible to reverse my osteopenia? Is it possible to get my estrogen back up to normal levels? Because it wasn't so low to be into primary ovarian failure, but I certainly wouldn't want to encourage it to go any lower. So ever since then I've just been trying to revitalise my sleep. Don't do anything fasted, because I always used to do all exercise and sauna and cold therapy and cold plunges, always fasted because I've always done that. So all these things I've been tweaking, but I suppose I've just been using, again, this as an example. Maybe just take me through if I was my younger self popped into your clinic, or myself now popped into your clinic, what would is the journey that we would go on together to address that?
I mean, I do get very young patients, and with sort of red S, and actually that is the population where, if I'm to say from a public health perspective, if we can prevent our adolescent girls from falling into that, whether it's intentional through an eating disorder background and then using sports as their sort of crutch, an element of for recovery or otherwise, or just generally unintentionally but not appreciating what they need to manage their output. If we can prevent red S in the adolescent population, we can definitely, from a public health perspective, prevent a lot of downstream effects, as you're sort of seeing as well. So if you were coming to my clinic as an adolescent, I'd be like, great, this is the right place to be. And actually, being on the pill, which is quite common, that, if you're not having a period, let's just give you a bleed for the bleed's sake. But actually, with the pill, what happens is it's suppressing ovulation because it's a contraceptive pill. So it's not necessarily allowing your body to recover, or even if you did recover, you wouldn't know you'd recovered because you're actually not ovulating because you're on the pill. Whereas we use HRT instead in treatment for girls and young women and, any women with red S, if we find that their estrogen levels are reduced. And it's not that the HRT is going to bring their cycles back. What it does is that HRT is not a contraceptive, it's supportive. So if you are recovering, you will get your natural cycles back, and you will be able to see whether you've recovered or not by using your cycles as a symptom to track the recovery. And the HRT's predominant role is bone protection, to give you the estrogen without giving you suppression of your sort of hormone axis, so that when you do start implementing the nutritional changes, because actually a lot of athletes will come to me and say, right, how do I fix this? And depending on whether there's an eating disorder history or not, you have to be very gentle to say the only way to actually fix it is to increase your calories and reduce your training volume. But, and this is where it differs when you're working with athletes who are actually competing, is I'll say to them, you and I both know what needs to happen. If it's a mismatch between calories in, calories out, something's got to give. You either increase your calories or you can't, because you can't match the amount of output. You might have to reduce your output. But you're in the middle of a competition cycle. You've got the Olympics coming up, or you've got a race coming next week, or, whatever. I always work with my athletes and say, look, I'm going to educate you to what the best case scenario is, ideal for if you could do that. Then you kind of find out what is better, and then what's good enough. And you can basically choose where on that scale you want to take the treatment options. And those will definitely depend on where you are in terms of your priorities. So if you are literally in the middle of your peak career and you're like, look, I know the best cases, I need to do this, and this differently. However, I don't want to, because this isn't, something else is a priority. That's fine. I'm not going to sit here and lecture you. This is exactly what sports gynaecology is about. It's about finding the middle ground in balance and empowering, again, going back to my values, empowering the athletes to know what best case looks like, so that they've got something for when they're ready to address that, to what's good enough right now. And they know it's a temporary state. But again, it's informed choice. What I hate seeing is when athletes come to me after they've retired, finding that they're struggling with their fertility, saying, nobody told me that if I waited till now that I'd struggle. Nobody told me that this was going to present an issue later. That's not informed. Yeah. And that's what I want to change, which is to give the athletes the opportunity to have the information. Then, just like our patients, do with that information what you want. Some will ultimately decide that their career comes first, and that's fine. And some of my athletes will say, look, I'm at that stage where a family is important to me, so I really need to fix whatever issue it is. And no, I'm not so focused on my career at this moment in time. And I've got those athletes as well, so all at different trajectory points in their careers. So yes, I think that's the main, in terms of the treatment. It is the calories and the carbohydrates to support the nutrition to be able to get the cycles back. Everything else we're doing is literally supportive.
Because I find that whenever I went to a PT, they'd be like, on rest day, have your calories at 1,300, and then on an exercise day, it's 1,500. And back then, I was thinking, okay, and I was just constantly hungry. And then I was like, this can't be right. And I read The Obesity Code by Dr. Jung.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I remember he was all about, you must try and increase your BMR. And the way to do that is eat more. So I was like, oh.
And muscles. If you're training and you're gaining muscle, your resting metabolism is going to go up.
Exactly. So you can imagine what I did. I was like, right, I must eat more, but of the right foods, and also build muscle, which I had been petrified to do because of course, back then, certainly, and you don't want to be this bodybuilder. And of course, I don't look jacked, and I've been going to the gym for many, many years. So I've been really concentrating on sort of almost protein of every gram per pound of protein. Slowly increasing the calories over the years to be able to at least almost sort of double how much I was having beforehand, and then also hitting the gym to build more muscle. Because when I had that scan, the practitioner said, well, bone and muscle are best friends. So if you increase your muscle...
stress your bone, and your bone is for it to grow.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that's sort of one of the right things, a way to go about it, just slowly but surely just start loading your body, eating more. Then what is this about the fasting, etc.? Because I find, even being in medicine, I get confused with different podcasts and people who come on, because
there is definitely a space for cycle tracking in sports. Yes, there are differences in your cycle. However, every single woman is different.